Today we're going to talk about
EverDrive! Kids, do you miss playing Nintendo games on your Nintendo consoles? Well, here's the illegal way that you can play...
Wait, hang on. Hey, wait, stop, no more.
Rob, I can't help but notice that you have some SD cards in your Nintendo cartridges.
None of this is legal, right? I assume.
I'm gonna have to destroy this for you right now.
Please don't.
Copyright lawyer Dan strikes again. Mission accomplished. What are we looking at?
All right, so I am going to preface this episode with this. This is a little gray that we're talking about today, and I don't mean just the color of the cartridge. And as a collector, you guys know me, ain't nothing like the real thing, baby. That said, these devices allow you to do things that you cannot do even with actual official game cartridges and hardware. So, what I'm talking about today are the EverDrive and the SNES devices for the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and N64. What they do, as you have so amazingly noticed, is they take, this is what this is, EverDrive. It is the form of a Nintendo cartridge. And at the top, though, it has a slot for an SD card. So what you do, it's...
I'm a little disappointed that the SD card also doesn't have a cool, sticker on
Nintendo, yeah.
it.
Like
Like
licensed.
Do you think Nintendo's going to license it? Actually, they do. They do have... You can buy a Nintendo SD card for, the Switch, but let's not go down that route. So what you do is...
hundreds of dollars for a 16 gig card.
Yes, that's correct. You put your SD card in your Nintendo...
Yeah, I was looking to see if they had repurposed a jacket on this, and they hadn't.
Nope. Or same thing with this, the SD to SNES. Put that right there in the top. This one has a USB slot for development. And you load this up with your ROMs. And same thing with the N64 one. Put them in your actual hardware, turn it on, and you're playing your ROMs. Now again, I am not the type of person where I'm going to take every single Super Nintendo ROM ever. Every single Nintendo ROM ever.
I am that person. How much does this cost?
Who do I call to obtain this
call?
Magical device?
I'm not
Let's
that type
put their
of person.
phone number on the internet.
If only there is a ability to order things like this on the internet, which there are.
Oh, in all seriousness, though, how much are we talking about for these things?
Okay, so it depends on what you want to do. Most systems, the TurboGrafx, the
have
N64...
everything illegally downloaded into this thing.
This device, this EverDrive N8, it was approximately $120.
Just for this?
Just for that cart. And that does not include your SD card and your...
What's the limitations on the SD card?
32 gigs, but there's not 32 gigs of Nintendo ROMs. I think the biggest SD card you would need for every Nintendo ROM and Japanese and European ever is 8 gigs. So I'm sure you have an 8 gig card sitting around.
Wow, that is really cool. And this will play, what is the benefit of doing it this way instead of doing it through, emulator?
Emulator. Okay. So as I said, me as a collector, I like to play things on my real legit hardware. If you look back here, I have my actual modded Nintendo for RGB, which we've talked about in the technical episode, and I use my 8-bit DOE controller
has too many buttons.
Too many buttons.
Oh, and wait a minute. That's not original.
Yeah, so this controller can play anything, but because it looks like a Nintendo, this is what I primarily use it for the Nintendo. Okay. And the Super Famicom or / Super Nintendo version, all buttons, these are all wireless, and this works with your legit hardware with these things called retro receivers. The point is, what you can do beyond just play all your ROMs in one, the advantage is I'm playing on real hardware. So some emulators aren't perfect. There's glitches, there's bugs, things don't necessarily work exactly as they're intended. On real hardware, however, you get the actual full experience. So when I play, and these cartridges have almost, they're not quite 100% compatibility, but most. Because a lot of Nintendo games, as they got more advanced, use things called mappers, which are like little chips inside the carts. Mm-hmm. So there is a chip inside this called a flip chip grid array that does emulation of those mappers of the hardware.
So what about things like Star Fox or Mega Man X that had the FX chips or for the Super Nintendo?
Correct. So the same thing. There's a chip in there, a specialized chip that specifically emulates a lot of those chips. Uh-huh. Super FX emulation is in a beta state right now, so I can put Star Fox on that, and it will actually work. It doesn't run at 100%, but the dude he's literally, as we speak, iterating on it. And this is why these chips are really cool. These cards are really cool because they're programmable. That means that they're future-proof. So as guys get more advanced with their programming emulation, I'll be able to play every game in theory. And the advantage of this, there's two advantages. A, because I am a guy who has all the games for real upstairs in the archive or whatever. I don't have to run down and get every single game or whatever. Switch
I
them up.
imagine his archive as being like the Indiana Jones room.
The Royal Archive.
the pushing the. I'm never ever going to look at this again.
I've taken you once, and that's actually pretty close to how it is. That's pretty close to how it is. So the advantage is I don't have to go and get all my games out. When I have my nieces and nephews over to play games, they want to play. We've been going through video game school where we start at the beginning and go forward. That means I always have to erase my Super Mario 64.
This humor ears really suck, Uncle Rob.
Shut up!
No, you are not allowed to play Super Mario
You can't
Odyssey
progress unless
until
you
you
beat
play
this.
every other Mario game.
That sentence has come out of my mouth. Yes. Oh, we really want to play Mario Odyssey.
I do the same thing with my kids.
You're
We're
so
watching
elitist.
Dragon Ball Z and not Dragon Ball Z Kai. I'm like, no, you have to learn. You have to suffer through the bad episodes to appreciate the good ones.
Let me be
So I don't
Sam.
have to erase my
Yeah.
saves on my actual games, and that can have them to start fresh. So when we did Link to the Past and Mario 64, I was able to do this.
So from a technical standpoint, though, I mean, is there any substantive difference from playing the ROMs through this EverDrive system as opposed to...
For most games, like I said, compatibility isn't 100%, but for the most part, no, there's no difference at all.
So like so it's better than like the little NES Mini, then.
Yes, because the NES Mini is using emulation. There
Right.
could be bugs or things that they add or whatever. This is what it is, because you are playing a ROM on a card on real hardware. So it's the real deal. And so you were talking about, let me talk about the Super Nintendo thing. So I said this is $120-ish. There are some eBay resellers that have them. There's some local sellers that have them. But try and be careful. Don't get too deep in the eBays. Because if you get Chinese knockoffs of these things, they're not going to work. They're going to be incompatible, blah, blah, blah. So I said this was $120-ish bucks. This one is more expensive because of the more advanced programmable chip that's inside of it. Excuse me. It was about just a taste under $200. So you're paying a lot of money to play ROMs on real hardware.
And you have to have hardware that's been updated to work with modern equipment anyway.
Yes. Now, the Super Nintendo can work with most things as is. The Nintendo I had modded for RGB. Same thing with the N64. The N64 one is also almost $200. It is quite expensive.
What the hell is this?
That's a 64DD. We'll talk about that in a different episode, talk about the 64DD drive. But in addition to being able to play all my ROMs and not have to switch them and save states, saves are files, so people save I can copy paste or download save states from internet sites of people who've beaten games that I'm not afraid to do and put them on these cards and I'm done. Or I can back up my actual save states. We can preserve data because there's files.
That's pretty cool.
The final thing that really pushed me over the edge, because again, I own almost every Super Nintendo game, N64 game that I want to have.
Yeah, they're all
Rob's
in here.
address is...
They're all right here.
They're all right there.
So for our giveaway,
Stop, don't touch that. But the other thing that I cannot do is when people come up with fan translations and hacks and homebrew for things. So recently on the Nintendo 64, there was a homebrew release of Mario 64, but the levels were Ocarina of Time. So you can use an emulator to play that, but it plays much better and cooler and more compatible on real hardware. On the Nintendo, I've probably talked about a game called Ninja Gaiden, right? We've talked about Ninja Gaiden before. Ninja Gaiden 3 was really super. Did you beat Ninja Gaiden 3?
Of course I did. Look who you're talking to.
You did not beat Mario.
we have talked about this.
Okay.
About the difficulty in the American version as opposed to the Japanese version.
Right. So what you can do is get a hack of where they fix the difficulty, fix the password system, and fix the continues. Copy that to an SD card, put it in here, and actually play Ninja Gaiden 3 the way it's supposed to be played. And things like Star Fox 2 now. Star Fox 2 now is officially released on the SNES Mini. But before, what you could have done is taken that with the FX emulation on this and played it on real hardware. And the original version of Animal Crossing that we got called Animal Forest that never came out in America.
right, on the cards.
On a cartridge on the N64. Fans have translated that, and now you can play that. So I can actually play that on my Nintendo 64.
So how much is the 64 one?
The 64 one is also about $200.
This all comes from the Ukraine?
Yes, all of these came from the Ukraine.
Dude, this is really cool. You almost talked me into it, but then I realized then I'd have to buy like all these little things that you do to make it compatible with my television.
Yeah, so the thing, okay, so if you don't want to mod your Nintendo, you really should mod. But if you don't want to do that, you can still use the yellow and red. It's just not going to look very good. Or S-Video looks better, but your receiver...
Yeah, but then you would have to have a television that plays S-Video. And, I mean, what TV in the last 5 years has...
Your receiver may have S-Video
So
in?
even receivers, everything is HDMI.
Yeah. So...
The
So
converters...
this is, you already have to be all in on
Oh, yeah.
original
Yeah,
hardware.
so if you have an old CRT
Yeah.
sitting around somewhere that has these inputs, this is what this is for, because I do have a few CRTs, big tube TVs with, like, you know, S-Video and RGB and component and what have you input. So, since I'm already playing this on these perfect monitors, I can just play this and go. So the way I'm supposed to play these games are previously only accessed via emulation. I play them real hard and they look great. There are versions for the Sega Master System. There are versions for the Genesis. The one for the TurboGrafx 16 I was about to purchase, but something has come along called a Super SD System 2, which emulates it does the RGB output, and it also
I got you.
thanks, and also emulates the Super System card, and it emulates CDs. This actually happened to me. As you all know, one of my favorite games is Ys Book 1 and 2, and it is a CD game. And I went to show my children. I pulled out my actual TurboGrafx CD system, put in the Ys disc, hit the turn on button. The CD goes and didn't spin. And I was heart sucking. I immediately got on eBay, tried to see if I could replace the CD-ROM drive. Was freaking out. Eventually, it did start spinning. It just needed time to warm up because I guess it's 25 years old or whatever. So that made me start to freak out about these things because there's only so much finite time with a CD motor. So there are SD replacement devices for some CD-ROM based systems, like the Super SD system for the TurboGrafx. It replaces the CD-ROM with an SD card, so I can copy ISO images of
badass.
Ys, Dracula X, all the great. Think about how many fantastic CD-ROM games there were for the TurboGrafx CD.
3.
Lords of Thunder, Gates of Thunder, Arizona. Okay, no, maybe
It's
not
all the same
Arizona.
game.
That's 3.
Yeah, so that system has made me not want to necessarily get an EverDrive for the Turbo. I'd rather get this device that emulates CD and does RGB out. The same type of device exists for the Saturn that replaces the CD-ROM in it with an SD card. So you pull out the CD-ROM.
But the ROMs for the Saturn aren't... I mean, they're not as good as like ROMs for the PS1 and things like that. They're almost non-existent.
No, yeah, that's hard to find them, but you can rip your own CD-ROM games if you own. Again, you should be legal Dan, and own every ROM and image that you have. I can show you my copy of Doki Doki Panic. It's still illegal. I can rip these things.
Another episode.
That's
Actually, that should be the title of the episode. I can rip these things. Dan in the background going.
Dan in the background. Yeah.
We'll have a
Actually,
whole episode about the digital millennium.
Yes, yeah.
Copyright Act.
So yeah, let's we'll talk about emulation. I want you to bring that up. But the point is, hardware is failing. And for the Saturn, there's a replacement where you can use an SD card. For the Turbo, there's a replacement.
That's pretty
And a dude is
That is
working.
cool.
I think there's a guy who is doing a Dreamcast replacement using a laptop hard drive. That's really cool too. So I haven't purchased those things yet, but I'm on a good track. And like I said, motors die. They only last so many times. And if I want to be able to play these classic games, I don't want to use emulation that may or may not be spotty, or I don't want to wait for Sega or whoever to re-release these things. I'm going to take matters into my own hands. That recalls taking my original hardware and modifying it and putting something like a flash drive or SD card or whatever into it. That's what I'm going to do. So that is what an EverDrive is.
I have one more question before we end the episode. Have you given this a blowjob yet?
Yes, I did. So, since I don't want lawyer Dan to show up, how about in the comments below, you tell me, do you think I'm crazy and insane to spend $500 just so I can play ROMs on actual hardware? Or am I the smartest guy in the room that's empty? Please like, subscribe, share. Thank you very much. Be legit.
we can't tell people where to get the
No, we
illegal
can't.
stuff.
No, that's true.
Go
We
in the
can't-
back
yeah,
alley.
we can't do
behind
that.
The links will be
McDonald's.
on the description of the video.
There will not be links in the description. But if you do a
There'll be
Google
links
search,
to Rob's Get Me Out of Jail GoFundMe page.
please go fund me to help me be able to feed my
His
children.
GoFundMe bail page.